It's the Bob McCown podcast featuring yours truly and John Shannon over there beside me.
Waiting for the title.
Basketball is the topic of conversation today, and look at the two num-nums that we dragged in here. The former head coach of the Toronto Raptors, Butch Carter, and one of the voices of the Toronto Raptors on radio, Paul Jones. Well, how are you two guys? Jones, you look beautiful, far away from the camera, not quite far enough, but pretty far.
Close enough for you, Bobcat.
Thank you, pal. And Coach, at the cottage, huh?
Yeah, I'm on. I got 2 more days of my quarantine. I'd gone to the States with my son to look at a school, and so I didn't know though when I came back that my wife was going to put me in the quarantine also.
Huh.
So,
Hold on, Butch. We let you back in the country?
I got no problem crossing the border, Robert. Trust me.
Well, it's good to see you both. We're in the midst of these playoffs. Well, before we get to the Raptors and what's happened so far, let's talk in general. Jonesy, to you first. You got to hand it to the NBA. This system they put together has been virtually flawless, hasn't it?
It has, and I think, Bob, what it speaks to is the fact that the NBA, as a pro sports league, has a true partnership. I mean, you listen to, Adam Silver and Michelle Roberts, and you hear about all that Chris Paul and Bismack Biyombo on the executive for the Players Association have done. I mean, let's face it, they want their money, they want to play, but they also want things to be safe too. And in the midst of it, all the social justice issues came out, and they've addressed that too. So I just think if partnerships in pro sports, and I've used this in other ways too, is a marathon to get it right. The NBA is 10 miles down the road of that 26-mile marathon. And, some of the leagues like baseball don't even have their shoes on. They barely run around the block. So to me, it speaks to the NBA and how progressive and proactive they are.
Coach, you've been watching this, I assume. Are you surprised that the NBA has done as well as it has?
No, they basically went out and listened to the science, and they created a virtual world that, to keep the virus out. And it's really commendable what they've done. They have separated themselves as far as leadership, in my opinion, against the other leagues in a crisis and this pandemic has created. But, it's still not over, but they've gotten through the first part basically on their NBA side and their WNBA side. So right now, I think, there are going to be some awards handed out to them.
And you know what, Paul? I think it's going to get better now that we've gotten rid of the so-called regular season, the 8 games. In essence, it was a good practice run for the NBA to do what they needed to do.
I agree, John. The bubble shrinks. They went from 22 to 16, and next week they're going to be at 8.
But even the competition, when you think about some of those, some of those teams were in the playoffs anyway, and they were using them just as tune-up games, and there wasn't near the physical side or the emotion involved in it. That to me that what we've seen this week since Monday with the playoffs starting, I think it's totally different.
I think, as Butch said, I think the leadership. I mean, you even watch the games, and you can. I mean, we're TV people. You can shoot a basketball game on TV so that, you can't help it with hockey or baseball. You see, the gaping holes in terms of fans, and there's nobody in the stands. The NBA's got this little virtual thing going. The game's shot tighter. I mean, you don't hear the noise. Sometimes you can mistake that noise in a can for actually what's going on, even though you're not there. But to the competition, it's playoffs, John, and I think you're seeing teams play hard, and basketball, hockey have that pickup component, right? Like guys playing on the pond or guys playing on the schoolyard, and you still get the real competitive juices going.
To that point, sorry, Bob, but to that point, you have seen the way the NBA has, consciously lit their arenas the last 6 to 7 years,
Yes,
where
yes.
Brooklyn, Staples Center, a lot of
New
the high
York.
end, a lot of the high end arenas where you never see fans anyway, and
Yeah.
it's the spotlight is on the court, and that to me is a big part of what has been successful for them in their arenas. And I don't notice near the difference when I watch it from Orlando.
Well, two of you guys, you and Butch, would know how much it costs to do that theater lighting. And in some places, like you said, the guys that aren't high end, the franchises that aren't high end, cost wise, it's prohibitive for them. So you're right though. In LA, in New York, in Brooklyn now, the focus is on the game and not necessarily the crowd.
Coach, I know you're having a few technical issues there, but I hope you'll be able to stick with us. Let me ask you from a coaching perspective, would you do anything different in the environment that exists right now as a coach?
Well, as a coach, you got to hope that your guys can stay locked in. It's a unique time, Bob, and so guys that spend so much time with their families. Some guys did not want to leave their families. And when I talked to the coaches before they went in the bubble, their concern was, are our guys going to mail it in? Especially those guys who were sitting at 9th and 10th. And you see that in reflection of how Portland played versus Sacramento, right? Sacramento had a chance. They never got off to a good start. They had a game or two, but they never played with any focus with 1 through 8. And then you see a young team like Phoenix. Phoenix hadn't played this well since Steve Nash played in Phoenix. Yeah. Right? It's true, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're possessed. So, someone asked me about it, and I said, it's a true sign of immaturity that you have a young team in Phoenix. When you're playing regular season games, they can't put 5 games like this together. Phoenix is one of the worst teams that allow scoring runs. And then we're teaching a class to a college, and we're using the Phoenix versus Indiana Pacer game, where the Pacers let Phoenix go on a 17-0 run and a 21-2 run. So, it's unique, and I think life really meets the road with being a professional athlete. Some of the guys didn't want to be there, and they're gone. And I think it's really amendable what Portland has done and how their team as a whole is healthy and is back and playing. And I don't think the first victory against the Lakers, was luck. I think they can compete against them. They're not afraid of them with Carmelo in great shape.
I want to dwell. I don't want to dwell on the Phoenix situation, but since you brought it up, and for those that aren't aware, and I can't imagine anybody watching this that wouldn't be, but Phoenix goes 8-0 in the play-in games and has to wait until the last night, literally, to find out that they don't make the playoffs after going 8-0. I'm wondering what you guys think the carryover effect of that could be for Phoenix, regardless of how they won, why they won, in terms of the other teams maybe not taking them seriously. But do you take something like this little nugget that wound up being disappointing, but nonetheless 8-0? Do you take that into next year? Is this a positive for the Suns going forward? Jonesy, to you first, then Butch.
Well, I mean, a lot of people were wondering in the first place why Phoenix was there, because they were 13th in the West. And I'm sure the NBA went through the scenario saying, well, look, if we put them in and they go 8-0 and these teams lose or whatever, yeah, they have a chance. I don't think the NBA even expected it, but I think you got to be careful with it. It's kind of, we've seen this a lot in baseball, in September baseball, when a team gets hot in September and they're out of it and people say, oh, wait till next year. Sometimes it's easier to play with no pressure. That being said, Monty Williams is a heck of a coach. He's been good everywhere he's been, and fortunately for him, he's had another chance now to do it. He's good with these young guys. He may use it as a motivational factor going into this offseason. Say, look, get yourself in shape. We come together. this is what is on the horizon for us. So, I mean, it's the old adage, you're either selling wins or you're selling hope. And I think they are selling hope. And I think it can do something for them, especially with their young guys. Devin Booker's been there a long time and has put up great numbers, but it's the old, well, good numbers, but the team's lousy. Well, they've started to win. At least they think they're starting to win now, what they showed in the bubble. So I think you got to be careful, but I do think there can be a carryover.
Well, Butch, to you, though you could argue the first 6 or 7 games that they played, that they won, they were loose. They didn't really think they had a chance. But look at, they won games 7 and 8 when they knew it might matter. What do you think that means for next year for them?
Well, I think that first of all, let's rewind. Ayton gets suspended to start the season, all right? And so you have your number 1 pick that should be in the lineup, that's a dominant athlete, and things just go bad from there, to the point where I felt at the end of the year that they would trade Ayton over this summer. Now, this period in the bubble has changed all that. So they have a chance to reset the whole franchise. They win those last 2 games, which are must-win play-in games. They were basically they faced 2 elimination games in 7 and 8, and you got to commend them for coming out on top. A lot better than our Leafs did. So, they got through the elimination game.
Some truth in that, pal.
Attaboy, Butch. Hey, Coach, I got to ask you one question. I want you to put your sneakers back on and those really short shorts you used to wear when you were in college. Is it easier to shoot? Actually, I'm lying. I don't want you to put those shorts back on. Is it easier to shoot in this gym than it is in an arena?
It is not easier to shoot in a gym that has no background. It was when the Miami Heat were bad, it was always terrible to go to Miami and play because they had the red seats with the orange rim. So, it's not easy. And the other part is that there are no fans. So, as you play your playoff series, eventually you're going to see your own fans and get a boost. So it's just raw desire and the professional skill set of the coaches matching up to the players' skill set. But it's not easy. The guys who are doing it, they're professionals, Bob, and they're making the most out of it. But I think when you look out over especially their home court numbers are going to be higher than what you're seeing now.
But John, I think that, I want the guys that are good at playing pickup, because those are the kind of guys you want. I mean, there's no crowd. Like Butch said, Brooklyn's down, as we record this, Brooklyn's down 2-0 to the Raptors. They ain't going home to some rabid crowd and people pumping them up. And they're going back to the same gym where they got their butt kicked for the last 2 days. So, in that sense, the cream's going to rise even quicker to the top. And I think you might see some quick series. And to Butch's point, I'm sure the Lakers were cheering like crazy for Memphis in that play-in scenario, because Memphis is a young team with not a lot of experience. And on the other hand, you got Portland, who went to the conference finals last year. They got Melo. Who's in shape.
I wouldn't want to play Lillard, boy. I wouldn't want.
No, exactly. And it's one of those where they got a good player, and when you have potentially the best player on the floor, you always have a chance at winning.
Well, the other guys that are going to play well are the guys who have a non-guaranteed contract next year. So you may see those guys making baskets that they don't normally make.
There's always an incentive.
Yes, there is.
Well, you talked about, pickup games and gym games. And I mean, we know that these guys, especially during the summertime, usually they're in the gym a lot and they're playing pickup games. And we all know the style of pickup basketball is dramatically different from what somebody like Butch would want to coach, the discipline of playing in the NBA. So now here they are in an environment that's very much like a casual summertime gym. No fans, not a lot of people around. I'm wondering if it's difficult for some of these coaches to convince these players to play the NBA system that they've been drilling into them, rather than revert back to that, blacktop gym philosophy that they've had in the summertime. Jones, both you guys have played. Do you think that was a problem?
I don't think so for the good teams. I mean, you watch the Raptors, the Celtics, the players that understand role definition. They understand they're in a different environment, but if we do what we do and take advantage of our chemistry, our system, and these other guys these other teams that are desperate or want to try and go rogue, we're going to beat them. I think the advantage in a situation like that, Bob, comes when you've got guys who are their competitive spirit is such that they play the same way in a pickup game in terms of their heart and their spirit, the way they do in the NBA.
Yeah,
so
maybe.
If I'm Toronto, I'm glad I have Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet. Marc Gasol is your classic old man at the Y on a Saturday that is smart, knows how to play, doesn't try to do too much. Boston's got a guy like Marcus Smart. It doesn't matter if he's playing on Mars. That's the way he plays. So those guys that can generate their own energy, you're going to have an advantage with them. And then there are other guys that, as you say, they're going to go rogue. They're going to try and do it themselves. And that's where Butch will tell you as a coach, you take that guy when he gets out of the system and sit him down.
That also speaks to these guys. By the time they play a game that means something, it goes back to the original concept. Those 8 games that they played, there's nothing that they see now is a surprise. They know exactly what the gym's going to be like. They know exactly the noise level they're going to see. Now all they have to do is worry about the competition. And to your point, Paul, I do see a ton of short series because there is no such thing as home court advantage anymore. And other than the shock of seeing Portland beat the Lakers, I mean, it could be Lakers in 5. It could be Lakers in 5 just because they wake up. I think we're going to see a lot of 4s and a lot of 5s in this first round.
Hey, Robert, I think that the thing that I think you guys are missing is that the bubble shows all the flaws throughout the franchise, right? We've already had at least one GM let go and one head coach, because when you're in the bubble, you really get to see if the coach has a voice with the talent, or you get to see that your talent is not working, because now an owner can see every single team play in one gym or 2 gyms. And that does not ever happen. So owners get to see because they're in their own location, and they really don't get to see the other 29 teams and how they perform. During the bubble, every single rumor, every single issue, every single clash is right there in front of everyone. And you're seeing coaches last game terminated. Vlade Divac out. You're seeing all the sores that are in a franchise, I think, percolate to the top because everyone is so close together to evaluate it.
One of the things we've talked a bit about, John and I in other conversations, especially about hockey and the bubble that they have, the 2 bubbles that they have, is if a series gets to 3-0, will the team that's down 3-0 literally mail it in game 4 because they want to go home? You're balancing this thing of, I want to win, but I'd like to see my family. I'd like to get out of this bubble. I'd like to resume some semblance of normal life. Do you guys buy into that? Coach, I'll throw it to you first. Is there something to that?
I don't. As long as I've been here in Canada, I've really been impressed by the character and integrity of players, even in the worst situations. And being down 2 games or 3 games, I don't think any hockey player is going to mail it in.
What about a basketball player?
Basketball player is another thing because they are pulled in separate ways with separate money, right? I mean, you got guys that may want to go home and they got $20 million guaranteed. So they've met their obligation to get the regular season money. So And I think that's why you've seen some of the changes in the teams, because in the bubble, the whole franchise, including the owner, got to see what all the issues were. It was so easy for all the issues to percolate to the top.
Mm.
And when the hockey playoffs are over, I would like to see what's going to happen with that, because I think you got the same thing. All those guys are in the same space, and an owner gets to compare his franchise against 5 others because they're all moving in the same building.
Jonesy?
I think Butch is right. I think part of hockey has a different mentality. Those guys are, people don't understand. Guys don't get paid in the playoffs. That's why you have playoff shares and it's bonus money. And I do think in the NBA, and Butch knows this, sometimes you're on a road trip, 4 games in 8 nights, and the last 3 games are in, 4 nights with a back-to-back in there. And I mean, all you have to do, Bob, you place the odd wager. You know what the gambling world's like. Just look at the odds that Vegas gives a team or the point spread on the 5th game of an 8-day road trip. I mean, those guys, some of those guys are willing to go home. And I just think in this situation, if their heart wasn't in it on the basketball side and they're down, it's like, you know what, I've got my money, as Butch said, we're out of here. And I do think that factors in, not with the majority of the team, but it will be a couple of guys here and there. And you better hope that you have a good leader, and it's not one of those guys that's going to do it.
Have either of you guys, and Butch, I'll ask you first, have either of you guys changed your opinion of who the Final Four and who the 2 in the championship series are going to be based on what you've seen and what's happened in the bubble?
No, I think Boston and the Raptors are headed for a collision course. And I also think Portland's going to take care of the Lakers.
You do?
Yeah, because Anthony Davis can't touch the ball enough. And when he's unproductive the way he was in Game 1, this is not something that's new that's happened to him. And, you're going to tell me between Game 1 and Game 2 and 3 he's going to acquire a super alpha ego? And it hasn't happened before. So I think that the Game 1 is a reflection of what's going to be. And it may go 7. And if it goes 7, then now you're dealing with the Lakers' fatigue with an older LeBron. So Portland's going to do serious damage to the Lakers one way or another.
Yeah. Butch, I agree. I think the winner of the Boston-Toronto series in the second round is going to be in the NBA final. Milwaukee just they haven't right now anyway. They haven't come back and looked like that team that was so good in the regular season. And the other team I picked to be in the finals is the Clippers. And look, Dallas is giving them a fight. They won. It's 1-1, and Dallas lost Game 1 with one of their best players being ejected from the game. And It's the one thing that people worry about with the Clippers. They have all this great talent, and they haven't had the time to put it together. You think playoff time, you would have had 6-7 months to get the chemistry down, understand the systems, refine things. They had literally an off season in the middle of the season, and they've come back now without practice time or a training camp. They're starting from scratch, and they're expected to be at their best. I still think they have the talent to do that, to get to the finals, but the road may not be as smooth as I thought it would be. And I think still think you're going to see the Clippers and either Boston or Toronto in the NBA finals.
Paul, is that the Sixers' problem too? Because I must admit, I know that I'm Boston's favorite, but I've been disappointed in what Philadelphia's done.
Yeah, and Butch can speak to this. I think it's a leadership issue myself too. Defining roles, getting guys to play roles. Especially a guy like Embiid, who, when he's on, he's great. He could be one of the top 5 players in the league, but I think he takes possessions off. I'm not sure about the discipline in his attitude and his as it relates to his performance. So, yeah, I think, and you know what? I think there may be, I hate to say it, but you never want to see a guy lose his job, but I think there may be a change coming in Philly too. Butch?
Well, the fact that they signed Harris and did not sign Jimmy Butler was a huge mistake, because that personality of Harris versus Jimmy Butler with Embiid does not work. Joel Embiid, I was talking to a coach yesterday, we were watching the game, and he called me and said, "Coach, what is wrong with Embiid?" I said, "I've never seen a young player that out of shape. And you can't win with a talented young player that's out of shape. He plays at the pace of you're at the local CYO. He doesn't play like an all-star." And now you have Brett Brown thrown in a situation where the roster is messed up. The $180 million to Harris killed that roster, the chance of that roster being good. Shannon, I don't think you should be. Philly is what they are. That team will get blown up. Not just Brown being gone, but that team will get blown up. And the other thing you guys have to, I don't think Milwaukee's been the same since Giannis headbutted the kid. All right? For him to lose control of what they were on pace to be, another 60-win team, is unusual. I correlate it back to when Kareem punched Kent Benson.
Benson, yeah.
Stars don't go off on like that. We've had the case where Dr. J and Larry Bird went at it in the playoff game, but stars just don't go off on non-stars unless there's something strange going on. Mm-hmm. So history is pretty clear that the head coach of Milwaukee has had 3 60-win teams, all right, and not been able to get them out of the playoffs to the finals. So last year it was the Raptors double teaming of Giannis on the right block with Gasol in Game 3, and the Raptors win the game and never look back because the coaching staff could not solve a low post double team, which is ridiculous. So, I think it's going to be whoever comes out of Raptors Boston and on the West. I think it's going to be a free-for-all. And the Eastern team will be sitting and waiting on the Western team because the number of games that have to be played in the West.
You may be right. I want to throw my 2 cents just on these topics that you guys have been chatting about. First of all, Embiid is a guy who doesn't have any heart, in my opinion, and never has. He doesn't have that special something that we expect all professional athletes, and especially elite athletes, to have. Jonesy, you said he takes plays off. He takes most of the night off. When it's tough.
Bon, this is a guy. He took
He's
his
got
team to 7
extraordinary
games.
talent, but you cannot defend. His performance is not just this year. It was last year. It was in the playoffs last year. He couldn't come to the table. He wouldn't come to the table. He wouldn't do the hard things. I don't want him on my team, and I'm going to bet you that Philadelphia is going to come to the conclusion that they don't want him at some point, whether it's this offseason or next. Secondly, Milwaukee, to the point Coach was talking about. It was easy to understand this team, who was salted away as the first seed in the East, coming out in those 8 games and just kind of lollygagging around. I got that. But they also came out in Game 1 of their series and basically played the same way.
Right.
There's something wrong there, and whether Coach is right that maybe it's coaching or maybe it was the headbutt. I don't know what the answer was, but there is something fundamentally flawed in Milwaukee, at least right now, and I'm waiting to see whether they can flip that switch. Well, they're good, but
Bobcat, to Butch's point, it's always been said, like, Budenholzer's a guy that, no, we concentrate on what we do. And, we don't worry about the other team. And that don't worry about the other team, as Butch says, translates into no adjustments.
Yep.
And that's what killed him when he had a 60-win team in Atlanta and LeBron took them out. And he had a 60-win team last year and the Raptors took him out. You have to look, and you can't predetermine what your team's going to do, because when the other guy steps into the path, you got to find a way around it. And right now they're not. It's not happening with Milwaukee.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
I know this is the Bob McCown podcast.
Yes, sir.
But we better talk about the Raptors.
Well, we're going to get there. It's okay.
We better talk about the Raptors. Because hey, Bob, they're pretty good.
Well, when you have your own podcast, you can talk about whatever the hell you want to talk about.
What do you mean? I don't have my own podcast?
Newsflash.
You might not last the last 5 minutes of this one.
Yes.
If you keep that attitude.
You're walking on fire, Kenny.
But this is what I've been up against for 20 years. 20 years.
Yeah, you sound like my wife.
Well, tell you what, I'm going to put Bob in quarantine then too. Okay.
All right. There's nothing I like doing better than keeping Shannon happy. So let's talk about this Toronto Raptor team specifically. Although I think we all know what we've known all year, and that is this is a very good team that is capable of repeating as NBA champions. I'm not saying they will. I don't think anybody here would say that. But this team is very capable. If there is one thing that I'm waiting for, I must confess that I'm more than a little bit concerned about Siakam's performance, and I think he needs to be a lot better for this team to win a championship. Coach, do you expect Siakam to find his game?
Hopefully he will, but he's got a problem because he's got the primary defender on him every night now.
Yep.
So, at the highest level, right? So, Siakam has been a great transition player. He's a great team player. I don't think he's met a ceiling. I think he's just got to figure it out, and the team has to help him figure it out. But it is disappointing, Bob, because I don't know how many times you can go to your bench like they did yesterday and say, win a game for us when you're deep in the playoffs and you tighten your rotation.
Yeah. So
Nick Nurse continues to do a good job in finding the pieces on the bench. And when the team's on the floor, there are guys who go on streaks and teams ice them out. They understand they can count. Winning teams can count. They know who's making baskets. They know who's not making baskets. And yesterday was an awesome example of a really good team showing the consistency of someone's got the hot hand, and let's make sure they get to touch it before someone else throws it up.
Yeah, Butch, I agree. The whole thing with Siakam is people he was riding in the sidecar last year with Kawhi, and he is, as Butch said, the primary defender, and all the schemes are aimed at him right now. And it's the one question that everybody has. Can this happen come playoff time? Because he's seeing the same team for a week to 10 days. It's not like he sees Utah on Monday night and they can't really handle him, and they don't have to figure it out again. And the next night he moves on to Denver and they're trying to figure it out. And the baseball analogy is he's going through the lineup for the third time. Right. Everybody knows or has an idea of what's coming. So the good thing about the Raptors is, and I don't know if you can count on this consistently come playoff time, because sometimes your stars just have to make plays. Their depth has been tremendous. And as Butch said, you get a guy like Norm Powell who's 6 points in game one and then goes crazy in game two, or Fred, who's been pretty consistent. They're finding different people to do it, and you hope for the Raptors' sake that continues. I don't know why it wouldn't, but if you get coaches that adjust, that's when it gets tougher.
But the other thing I would say is that the pre-Kawhi team wouldn't have been as patient as they were last night in game two. Brooklyn led every quarter. And there was no panic.
No.
And I think that's something to be said for maybe it's what Nick Nurse puts in place, but to me it's still on the players, and when they needed to, they knew that they kept it close enough that when they needed to make a push, they could in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, look, Yeah, go ahead, Coach.
If there is a sign that I'm worried about, it's Ibaka. All right, Serge Ibaka was the best Toronto Raptor ever playing against West Coast teams last year, and he hasn't found that rhythm where he's making that 18-foot jump shot. And when he does make those 18-foot jump shots, then his man cannot help. And so right now, they're basically playing 4.5 people versus a full 5, and the spacing is it. So the Ibaka's numbers I'm concerned about, because when he is a shot maker, that first group is a lot better. Gasol can move the basketball. You have your scorers, your defenders. They're just a lot better. That's the only concern I have in what I've watched in the early games.
Brooklyn has no chance against this team, do they, guys?
No.
Unless Durant shows up.
And Kyrie Irving.
Well, and don't forget, no Joe Harris. He's out of the bubble now until Game 6. So I mean, it's not going to get to Game 5. I don't think so.
So if you're the Toronto Raptors, and I know they never think of this. This is like guys like us sitting on the sidelines. We project this. No player, no coach, no general manager, no president of a team is ever going to acknowledge that they look ahead to who might be down the road. But if you're the Toronto Raptors, who do you want in the second round? Do you want Boston? Do you want Philly?
I'd say you want Philly, but I don't think you're going to get them. And like John said earlier, I think this is 4, maybe 5 games at this rate. Like I said, they're not going back to Philly where the crowd's going to help them. They're going back to the same gym where they got their butt whipped twice. And, Boston is in a situation where in their first year, guys like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, they got to the conference finals. Kyrie Irving came in and threw a wrench into the chemistry last year, and he's gone. And now those guys have gone back to where they were a couple years ago with a little more experience and better skill too. So I think Toronto's going to get Boston, and I think that's going to be a heck of a series, and the winner gets to the finals.
Do you like the Raptors over Boston, Coach?
I think it's a tough series. You got 2 of the best young coaches in the league facing off, and I actually think Boston is better with Hayward out.
Wow.
Brown, their wing players know they're going to play. They know they're not going to lose minutes to Hayward, and I just think they're locked in. Yesterday they were locked in and focused, and again, Toronto is the champion, and I believe that has real value for them. So I would take Toronto over Boston in 6.
Hey, Butch, do you think coaches have a bigger role in the bubble than they would if they were in their regular arenas?
No, I just think they get exposed more, right? Like Nurse and Masai have a rhythm with that team. Nothing's going to interfere with that, right? Those guys who don't have that connection, there's a problem. When New Orleans couldn't wait to get back to New Orleans to let Alvin Gentry go, there's a problem. And that's what the bubble exposes. That's what I was talking about earlier, John.
Yeah. No, but I look at what Brad Stevens looks like a surgeon on the sidelines in those first 2 games, and I just wonder if he has more chance in the bubble without noise, without the players getting overly emotional because the crowd can't get them jacked up. I mean, I just wonder if that's a bigger factor.
No, you got to remember, of all the guys in the league, Brad Stevens does not huddle with his coaches on a timeout. All right. He does what I did. He goes straight to the players. Brad Stevens has the most direct contact with his players. Even you see him giving them the first play to start the game. Mm-hmm. His first play starting the game is always for one of his bigs that he knows isn't going to get many shots. But he feeds him just to get him started, make him feel good. Timeouts, he's not huddling with his coaches. He's got his board. He gets to his chair and he gets to him. He really is, one of the top strategists in the league. And I think that they've grown around him because he's had this group. But they're really good at following, his direction. And he doesn't throw the junk defenses that our guy Nurse does. I was laughing because Nurse had a shirt on yesterday called Box and One.
Box and One.
And he ought to be glad Golden State's not playing in the bubble with that boxing one shirt. But I think they are the two most dynamic young coaches in the entire NBA with what they do. And personally, I hope that Brad Stevens leaves the NBA and heads back to the state of Indiana.
Oh, I was going to say, there we go. Hoosiers. There you go. You know,
yeah, well, guys, the clock is ticking, and we've gone a little bit overtime what we usually do, but we could sit here all day and chat. Here's what I want to do. I want to ask you guys if you're amenable to coming back a couple of weeks down the road as we progress, and at least once or twice before these playoffs are over. If you're okay with you guys have a standing invitation. Yes, no?
I'm in Bobcat. But I want to ask you something. You need to amend the last line. Can you give me the Muhammad Ali poem about your show? Do you remember that?
I love your show and I admire your style, but the pay was so cheap I won't be back for a while.
If you could amend the last two lines, I'll be back.
Yeah, there you go.
John, over to you. Write the check, pal.
I'm in.
Jonesy, as I've told you many times in your career, it's an investment in the future.
Yes, it is.
Coach, you want to jump in?
Mine's is very simple. I've always been here for you. Just raise your hand. Let me know. Put me in a game, Coach.
We love you. Coach. We love you. Guys, enjoy the rest of the playoffs. Have a great weekend upcoming, and we will chat down the road. Thank you, boys.
Thank you. Yeah.
The coach, Butch Carter, Paul Jones, for John Shannon, Bob McCown. See you next time on the podcast.